All right, it's about that time again. I asked for all of your draft-related questions, and you delivered hundreds of draft-related questions. So let's get into it. First question here comes from Kyle. He says, I'm a Vikings fan who's pretty nervous about our upcoming draft. Trust me, Kyle, every Vikings fan is very, very nervous right now. He asked, which do you think is the preferable option? Trading the farm to get J.J. McCarthy or keeping our picks and taking Penix in the first round? Neither. Folks that are Patreon subscribers know this already, but I just put out my quarterback rankings. It's the first position group I actually finished because I did write-ups on the top 6 guys. And they took me a long time to get through. A, because there's just a lot of top quarterback prospects in this class, more than usual. But B, I feel like I had to do more games than normal on this class to really try to figure them out. I ended up doing, I think, 9 games of J.J. McCarthy. I did 7 games of Bo Nix. I did 7 games of Michael Penix. And again, if you're on the Patreon, you already know this. I have Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy in the same tier. It's Caleb, May, Jaden. You could argue one or the other for May over Jaden. I happen to prefer May. Again, that's a topic for another show. But in my next tier after that, it's McCarthy and Nix right next to each other. So you have to ask yourself, is J.J. McCarthy that much better than Bo Nix, where we're going to trade a lot of assets to go get him within the top 5, because it's going to take a top 5 pick to get J.J. McCarthy? Are we trading that many assets to go get him when, in my opinion, you could probably get Bo Nix for free? Well, not free. You have to spend a first-round pick on him, but you don't have to trade up to get Bo Nix. And I think there's a lot of qualities that Bo Nix has that could still fit that offense in Minnesota really well. I mean, he throws excellent on the move. I think he's better under pressure than Penix. I think he's more creative under pressure than Penix. He also has a pretty big arm. They didn't really get to show it off at Oregon that much just because of the nature of their offense. But stop me if you've heard this before. Oregon not letting a very talented quarterback throw downfield. Where have we seen that? But I will say that Bo Nix, from a traits standpoint, is still pretty good. Like, he's a big guy. He's athletic. He's experienced. He's literally the most experienced college quarterback ever. He protected the ball. I had to do a lot of games of his to try to see enough downfield throws because a lot of their offense was very horizontal, which is more of a college problem than anything else. Like, a lot of college offenses are very horizontal rather than vertical. But again, topic for another day. But once I got 6-7 games in and you got a big enough volume of downfield throws charted, I actually liked what I saw. And that's not to say that I didn't like what I saw from McCarthy. Again, the deeper I got into it with JJ, the more I liked him. And I think that there's 6 quarterbacks in this class that could legitimately end up as starters. JJ's one of them. But is he that much better than Nix, in my opinion, that I'm trading multiple first-round picks, maybe a second-round pick on top of that, to get him when I could take Bo Nix at, I think Vikings are at the 11th overall pick, and still preserving assets to build around Nix? I don't think I would do that. 11 might be a little bit rich. Like, again, full transparency, I have like a late first-round grade on Nix, late 1, early 2. But Nix at 11 is more palatable than JJ in the top 5 plus giving up assets. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make here, right? Question number 2. This is from pick 259. Which prospect are you substantially higher on compared to the current consensus? Well, maybe it is Bo Nix, but in order to not just talk about the quarterback class all day, let's go with a deep cut. How about Northern Iowa defensive tackle Christian Boyd? I understand it's a smaller program. He hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, in my opinion. He didn't even get a combine invite. He's actually going to be doing his testing at Cooper DeJean's pro day. I think it's like April 8th or something like that, maybe April 7th. But that's where he's doing his testing, is at Cooper DeJean's pro day. This dude's a badass. All right, he's 6'2", 320. If I was going to put a comp for him, it's a bear. Like, he just mauls people. Showed up at the Shrine Bowl going up against some really good interior offensive linemen, and he just tossed them around like rag dolls. Like, he was maybe the best player on the field the entire week of practice, dominated in the game as well. He's a great kid. We interviewed him over on the podcast channel, Bootleg Football Podcast. I want to say that's coming out sometime soon. Grew up as a multi-sport athlete, and you can tell, like, great feet, great hips for a 320-pounder. You could play him at 3 technique. You can play him at shade. Obviously 4-eye, he can handle just fine. I might even put him at 5 technique. Like, he is so strong and powerful. Doesn't have the length that you expect from a typical 5 technique, but he kicks people's ass like you want a 5 technique to do. He's just completely immovable in the run game, got way more wiggle as a pass rusher than you think he should at 320 pounds. Like, I think he's going to be one of the top 5 to 6 interior defensive linemen drafted, or at least he should, based on my evaluations. I love this kid. I think he could very easily be a mid-round pick. I don't want to project him to be this year's Kobe Turner. I mean, you guys know I was really high on Kobe Turner last year. They're different kinds of prospects, but in terms of underrated interior defensive lineman that does not get talked about nearly enough, Christian Boyd, Northern Iowa. The kid's just a monster, all right? He's an absolute monster. And there's going to be a lot of teams at DeJean's Pro Day, and for good reason, but I guarantee you they're all going to be looking at Boyd as well. He is on everybody's radar in the league, and he should be on your radar too. Ooh, this is a good one. Seth Witt asks, who were the Dan Campbell players that you could see going at 29? Also, doing the yearly live draft reaction live stream. Yes, we are doing the draft reaction stream. Again, annual tradition. I know you guys have been here for years at this point, so most of you know this, but for those of you who don't, the reaction stream that we do over draft weekend, which is like 17, 18 hours of just live streaming every single pick of the draft. We cover every single pick, no breaks, no nothing. It's just straight analysis all 3 days. That's not on this channel. That is on our podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. If you're also subscribed to the Bootleg Podcast, maybe you didn't see it this week, but we had a huge, like, hour-and-a-half long episode with JT O'Sullivan, QB School, going through all the top quarterbacks. He gave his unfiltered thoughts on all of them. So some of you maybe have already seen that, but if not, go check that out. But yeah, on the Bootleg Football Podcast, again, all 3 days, we are live during the draft, covering every single pick. But back to your Dan Campbell question, or I guess Lions question specifically. Like, if you're looking at the roster, they don't really need anything desperately, which is why I think they might be a trade down candidate. If somebody's coming up to get a quarterback at 29, they want the 5th-year option, like, they're like a prime target for a trade down, right? Or I guess trade up in their case. But if I'm looking at the roster and they absolutely have to pick something at 29, I'm still looking at corner. Like, I still think they could use one more guy. I'm not sure how much I trust Amik Robertson as a full-time starter outside at this point. And I think they could still use another receiver. Amon-Ra is obviously incredible. We like Jameson Williams as a role player at this point. A good role player, but a role player nonetheless. But I still think they need an X receiver, like a true X receiver to complement what they already have. Unfortunately, there's probably not going to be many left at 29. Marvin and Rome are going to be long gone. A.D. Mitchell might, maybe, possibly be gone. Malik Neighbors isn't really an X to me. Brian Thomas Jr. could eventually be an X, but he's also probably going to be gone. So you're looking at wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 by the time you get to 29. And out of all the guys in this class that are in that range that could be an X, there might only be one, which to me is Xavier Legette, who also happens to be a good culture fit with Dan Campbell too. Like, he is an extremely hard worker, practices his ass off. I think he kind of fits that Lions culture of just being grinders and also being freak athletic talents that could just use a little bit of coaching to unlock them. I really like Xavier Legette. I know people are worried about the late breakout with him, but there were a lot of circumstances surrounding his college career that were just honestly really tragic and unfortunate. I'm not going to get into them here, but there's a reason, multiple reasons actually, why it kind of took him a little bit longer to get going in college, and I'm not going to hold those against him. When he finally got his opportunity in the bowl game, not this last season, but the one before that, he dominated, and he planted his flag, and he said, when I get my opportunity finally next year as a 5th-year player, I'm going to do that every single week, and he pretty much did. Like, I think Xavier Legette's awesome. Again, he's got size and physicality, so he can be an X receiver. He's got burst. He's got great yak ability. He's a good contested catcher. I think he only had like 2 drops the entire year. Like, as far as traits and skill set go, like, he's a perfect fit. As far as practice habits go and just in general, fitting their culture of hard work and everything like that, he fits them there too. There's actually very few receivers in this class that I think are better for Detroit specifically than Xavier Legette. So if he's on the board at 29, wouldn't be surprised if he goes off there. Also wouldn't be surprised if he's gone by 29 too. There's a lot of teams that I think are very, very interested in Xavier Legette. Next question comes from Ethan Phelps, who says, what is the most obscure school you have filmed for from this draft class, and what player were you watching? Probably Holy Cross, I would say, if I had to guess. I think the enrollment there is like under 4,000, so again, very small school. But they have a receiver there, Jalen Coker, who's just a freak in nature. Like, he is so athletic, and he just moves so different, let alone from players, at his level of college football. But even when he was at Shrine Bowl going against some really talented DBs that are all going to be in the NFL, like, he was cooking people at the Shrine Bowl, okay? So I understand you don't expect like an NFL player to come out of Holy Cross, but he's going to get drafted. I don't know where he's going to get drafted, but he's going to get drafted. He's very athletic. I guess you could consider him, I don't want to say raw, underdeveloped. Let's say underdeveloped. Because again, he was at Holy Cross, like, what do you expect, right? But I think he's going to get drafted. He's going to be in a training camp somewhere, and he's going to be stashed. Because guys who are that athletic, like, every wide receiver coach in the league is going to be like, just let me teach him something. Let me see what's there. He is just a crazy mover. So can't wait to see where he goes. Obviously, I love it when small school kids get a chance in the NFL to try to make it. I think he has a legitimate shot to make it, and I'm really excited to see him get that shot. Next question from Jiho Ham, might be Jeho Ham. Apologize if I butchered that. He asks, it used to be that you could get good nickel/slot DBs in round 4 and later. Do you see those guys going higher than that with the position's increased importance? First things first, well, I have 3 things. Number 1, great question. Number 2, I love that I finally get to talk about this topic because I think nickel is a spot that doesn't get talked about enough for how important it is. And third thing, I will give you my answer in just a second, because you guys know we have a tradition to uphold on this channel, which means we have a deadline to hit, and we got some bills to pay, and we have to pay homage and respect to our most faithful, understanding, at times, sponsor on this channel, who's been coming back month after month, year after year at this point, and has put up with a lot of my bullshit. And I appreciate you guys. I assume they're watching this right now. Thank you for being understanding again. But we only have a few minutes left, so let's talk about Factor. Look, the food is good, okay? I talk every month about how good the food is, how convenient it is. You can heat it up in 2 minutes. It tastes great. It's portioned well. Makes for awesome weekday lunches. You know all that already because I've been yelling this at you at the end of every month for like 3 years now. But we got to talk about the wellness shots, all right? These shots are awesome. I know they're kind of a sleeper pick. I know that not everybody gets them, but trust me, you start your day with one, you feel ready to take on the world. The apple, ginger, lemon, cayenne shot, it's like a cold plunge for your insides. I know it sounds like it doesn't go down smooth, and I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it's ginger and cayenne pepper and lemon, so I'm not going to pretend it goes down like water. But oh my God, you feel great after one of those. You start your day with that in the morning, you grab your meal, you go to work, you down that for lunch, or you have it waiting for you with something quick and easy and tasty when you get home, or you eat chorizo chili for breakfast, like me. It may or may not have done that a couple times, but I'm not going to judge you. Do whatever you want. It's your food. They've got 35 different meal options per week with more than 55 add-on options, so you could pretty much get whatever you want. But whatever you do get, make sure you get the wellness shots too. That's the one thing I'm going to recommend above everything else because they are so good. If you go to factor75.com, use promo code FilmRoom50, that will get you 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month's box as well. Again, promo code FilmRoom50, factor75.com, 50% discount on the first box, 20% discount on the second month's box. All the food's great. The wellness shots are awesome. I cannot possibly recommend Factor enough, and it's why they're pretty much one of the only sponsors that I work with regularly because I only do sponsorships for stuff that I really like, and I really like Factor. Thank you once again to Factor for sponsoring today's show. Obviously, been a long-time sponsor of the channel, and we appreciate them. But with that being said, I do want to get back to the question at hand, which is about the nickel position and why somehow, in the age of 11 personnel, in the age of NFL offenses being more wide open than they ever have before, it's still a very undervalued spot, and I don't really know why. If you go down the line of the best defenses in the NFL last year in terms of points per game given up, you got Baltimore, you got Buffalo, you got Kansas City, Tampa was top 5. All those teams have top-tier nickels, right? Kyle Hamilton, Teron Johnson, Trent McDuffie. He's their best outside corner too, but he was also their best nickel. Like, he was spectacular whenever he was inside. Christian Izien in Tampa was amazing as I think an undrafted rookie at a Rutgers. Won the job early on, and he was fantastic, right? But the reason why you need a good nickel to be a great defense is because nickels are not just, hey, we're lining up and we're playing man coverage in the slot. Like, yes, that's a component of it, which is, it's also harder to cover in the slot too, because everybody's got two-way goes, right? It's one thing if you're a boundary corner, especially in college football, but if you're a boundary corner where it's like we're using the sideline to our advantage and we're just trying to bully you into the paint because I have help, quote unquote help, from the sideline, that's a whole different animal than I am playing 5 yards off a really shifty slot receiver that has a two-way go and can go in any direction and run any route. Like, it is so much harder to play man coverage in the slot, which is why generally you're going to get zone help to the inside. Like, that's why cover one rat exists, right? Is so that slot defender can play with outside leverage while still having inside help or inside zone help from a linebacker that's like sitting there waiting to help him to the inside. So it's almost impossible to just like play head up man from the slot against like NFL caliber slot receivers. But if you got a guy that can do it, that's worth its weight in gold. But that's only half the job, because guess what? When offenses are spending 60, 70, 80, sometimes 90% of the time in 11 personnel, meaning they got 3 receivers on the field, it's not like they're not going to run the ball. Like, they're going to run the ball. And if you're going against a team like the Rams that has all these receivers on the field, but they're still running like 2-back run concepts because they use fucking Ben Skoranek, a wide receiver, as a fullback, like, guess what, dude? Wear your hard hat. You're a linebacker today, bud. Like, that's what a nickel has to be in the modern NFL, because teams aren't going to not run the ball just because they got 3 receivers on the field. Like, they're going to run it. They have to run it. So you need a nickel that can tackle. You need a nickel that can get off blocks. You need a nickel that can blitz. And you need a nickel that can cover. You know how many DBs can actually do that? Not a lot. I actually think it's harder to find a really good nickel than it is to find a really good outside corner, which I know sounds insane, but there has never been a great defense that didn't have a great nickel. It just doesn't exist. So you need one, and it's hard to find because these guys got to do everything. They got to be involved in every single down and distance. Like, there's no plays off. And I understand that teams find them in day 3 all the time. It doesn't mean it's easy to find, okay? Like, they will luck their way into finding a Teron Johnson. But if they knew what Teron Johnson was going to be, guess what? He would have been a first-round pick, because every team in the league wants that kind of guy. I mean, hell, Trent McDuffie was a first-round pick because everybody knew that he was going to be an elite nickel based on how good of a blitzer and how good of a tackler he was when he was coming out. Like, obviously, yes, he could play outside corner, but everybody knew with how physical he was and how reliable he was as a run defender that was going to be a top-tier nickel in the NFL. And guess what? He's a top-tier nickel in the NFL. So if you can find somebody that can do it, cough, cough, Cooper DeJean, they go high. Off the top of my head, there's a few really good pure nickels in this class, or at least guys that I think could be pure nickels in this class. Mike Sainer still from Michigan, Jerry Jones from Florida State. You know, obviously, I just mentioned DeJean as well. Most people profile DeJean as an outside corner, but I think he's a nickel specifically because I know he can tackle. So he'll be fine outside, but I think he's going to be a more impactful player if he's inside, because I think he can do that. So Anyway, hope that made sense. I can't believe in this day and age people are not drafting nickels in the top 20, because I've never seen a great modern defense that doesn't have one. Next question from Fabio. He asks, do you also think that Tory Taylor has Hall of Fame potential, dudes like the Wemby of punting? Fabio, let me tell you something. All right. I'm not even sure Tory Taylor's the best punter in this class. And keep in mind, I scout punters by sound. That's how I declared Ryan Stonehouse as punter 1 a couple years ago, because I went to the Shrine Bowl and I heard the sound coming off his foot, and I was like, holy shit, that is different. And then Stonehouse ended up being pretty good. So, you know, this method might work. But I got to the Shrine Bowl this year. Shout out to them. I don't know how they find really good punters every year. But they had this kid, Ryan Rakow from BYU. All right. I was standing there after practice talking to a couple buddies of mine, and I stopped mid-conversation because I heard this dude launching nukes from across the field. I was standing there on the sideline at probably like the 15-yard line. He was on the opposite 20, and he dropped it 4 inches off the sideline on the 6, okay? I was watching him do these punts where, if you ever see the movie Wanted, where they're like curving bullets and stuff, he curved it 8 yards out of bounds and then back into field of play, and it was spinning like a UFO. Like I don't understand the physics behind Ryan Rakow, but that dude is going to be impossible to deal with as a returner, because he's got every club in the bag. He's got every type of punt you can think of. He's accurate. He's got a leg. Statistically, he was awesome. I didn't think the coverage unit at BYU was like spectacular, so his net got killed a little bit. But as a punter, I think Ryan Rakow is the best punter in this class. All right, like Tory Taylor is great, but this feels like Stonehouse version 2 to me. I know you guys didn't click on this video expecting to get hot takes on punters, but believe me, folks, Rakow, BYU, he's going to get drafted. Ooh, this is a good one to end on. This is from Tavita Lole. Apologies if I messed that up again. Draft prospects, people are overthinking. I definitely think Marvin Harrison Jr. is being overthought quite a bit in this class. Like, guys, what are we doing? Like, I love Malik Neighbors. I think Malik Neighbors is spectacular. He's going to be a top 10 pick, or at least a top 12 pick. And he should be. Like, he is incredible, right? I think he is the most dynamic slot receiver prospect in this class. Emphasis on the word slot receiver. And those of you who are on the Patreon that saw my Malik Neighbors breakdown video on the Patreon know what I mean by that. Rome Odunze, incredible. In most years, he'd be wide receiver 1. I think he's going to be a future Pro Bowler. I think he's going to be a day 1 starter, and a spectacular one at that. Marvin's different. I also think we're overthinking Drake May a lot. Like, not even a little, but a lot. I think a lot of his issues are fixable. I think it's tied to... Honestly, it's tied to things that he wasn't really asked to do. And JT O'Sullivan made a great point about this when he came on the pod, and he was talking about Drake. But in the kind of air raidy world that he comes from, they're not drilling footwork into him and turning him into like a finely tuned machine that's always on time. You know, it's a very loosey-goosey style of offense where he wasn't developed yet. All right. He's coming out early. He's not the most experienced guy. He's a very young quarterback, but the tools are there. The coachability is there. I think if he goes to a place like Minnesota, right, you know, reuniting with Josh McCown, who ironically coached him in high school, but I think if he goes there and they are just drilling footwork and timing and consistency into him, he could be an unbelievable quarterback, right? But he needs time. Like, he just needs time. I mean, if he goes and sits behind Darnold and Darnold's ready to play, at least for a year, or at least as long as they can give him before they got to throw Drake in there. But if he is afforded that opportunity to develop with a coaching staff like the one in Minnesota that is going to refine him, when in North Carolina, they just never really refined him. They basically said, hey, you're the best athlete on the field and you have a crazy rocket arm. Go win the game, Drake. I just don't think it was a very good environment that was conducive to him developing into an NFL quarterback there, right? But, you know, if he goes to Minnesota, I think that staff can get the best out of him. they can get rid of those bad habits, or at least minimize those bad habits, turn him into a more consistent passer, a more consistently accurate passer. And once you fix the footwork and you kind of get timing instilled in him, there's not really a whole lot else I don't like. In fact, there's everything else I love. Like, again, the tools, the arm strength, the coachability. He's awesome. I talked about Minnesota not trading up for JJ. I would trade up for Drake if I was them, because he's got an unreal high ceiling, and there's not that much you got to fix. Obviously, the consistency is not where you want it to be, but he's a young quarterback, an inexperienced quarterback who just needs better coaching. Like, that's it. He just needs better coaching. You give him better coaching, and he's going to be awesome. All right, I think that's it for today. I apologize if I didn't get to your question. I had, again, like hundreds of them submitted. But if I missed you today, come by the Discord, which is linked down below. We do patron-only Q&A sessions like all the time on the Discord. I try to do one a week. Sometimes it's every other week, depending on shooting schedules and stuff like that. But I do frequent Q&As over there for patrons. And if you didn't get your question answered today, you could probably get it answered over there. We are in the home stretch now. A lot more content to come between now and the draft, both on this channel as well as on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel. So thank you for all of you watching this, and thank you for all of you watching everything that we still have to come between now and the draft. I don't know what the next thing I'm releasing is, but I think it's a Johnny Newton video. So yeah, I'll see you in the Johnny Newton video. Cheers.